and welcome to World Konnect. The horrific shooting in Orlando, the Brexit dilemma, and a revelation involving Chinese authorities that has triggered the anger of many in Hong Kong. We get to all of this and much more in today's show, but first let's take a look at the headlines. To be or not to be, Britain's dilemma on the crucial European Union exit continues as the country readies for a referendum on the 23rd of June. Tributes pour in for killed Labour MP Joe Cox, even as the police charges a 52-year-old man for the murder. After its worst mass shooting incident, would America finally decide on stricter gun possession laws? President Obama voices support for tough action, voting on the issue expected soon in the US Congress. Booksellers' revelation against Chinese authorities sparks public anger in Hong Kong. Demand grows for government to pursue the case of missing booksellers with Beijing. And Sudanese artists come together with a message to prevent illegal migration. The Boat of Death narrates the tragic story of migrants in the Mediterranean, their sufferings and their struggles. Well, let's get started from news from Europe. Britain's dilemma over whether or not leaving the European Union would be a good idea would soon be resolved if the referendum on the 23rd of June is successful. While Prime Minister Cameron has been trying to convince people to stay back, senior Conservatives are campaigning to leave. With the country divided into Leave and Remain groups, what remains to be seen is whether Britain would become the first country to leave the EU in the bloc's six-decade history.
To be or not to be is the question hovering around the minds of many of the Britons as they prepare for a referendum on June 23rd to decide Britain's future in European Union. With several recent polls suggesting that momentum is with the Leave camp, Remain supporters have stepped up efforts to convince voters. Prime Minister David Cameron has been campaigning hard and making string of television appearances to convince people to back Remain. The shrill war of words was taken onto water as the rival camps debated Brexit, floating over the Thames in London. As Cameron answered questions on EU referendum, he warned on the challenges the country would face in case a Leave vote happens.
If we vote out, the experts warn us we will have a smaller economy, less employment, lower wages, and therefore less tax receipts. And that's why we would have to have measures to address a huge hole in our public finances. And nobody wants to have an emergency budget. Nobody wants to have cuts in public services. Nobody wants to have tax increases.
Leading the in camp, Prime Minister Cameron is facing deep splits in his own party, with many of the Conservative parliamentarians advocating an out. The left-leaning Labour Party, whose supporters could decide the June 23rd referendum, is all vocal for the EU membership. Senior Conservatives such as Michael Gove and Boris Johnson are leading the Leave campaign, with a handful of Labour MPs and UK Independence Party batting for it.
Europe's leaders have put ideology ahead of security. They've pursued projects like the single currency and the borderless Schengen zone, which have weakened our continent's resilience.
So I think they can see that on the democratic side of the argument, they are losing. But what they say is that that sacrifice of democracy is worth it for the economic gain.
I just think it's a bunch of upper middle class rich people and multimillionaires laughing at people whose voices have never been heard for 40 years, who are here today screaming out, please listen to us.
A string of global institutions, including the International Monetary Fund and G7, have backed Cameron's argument that Britain's economy would be damaged by Brexit. Other EU member states have also urged British voters to favour an in. European Council President Donald Tusk said leaving European Union doesn't make any sense.
The UK has achieved a position of a key state in the EU whose voice is respected today more than ever before. Many of the British ideas about the EU are gaining support all over Europe. There are so many things we can do together. Leaving now doesn't make any sense.
The whole Brexit debate has even left the voters divided and confused. Many voters are frustrated for not being adequately informed about the pros and cons. If Britain votes to leave the EU, it would be the first country to do so in the bloc's six-decade history.
Now, the issue of Britain leaving the EU is witnessing a battle between two camps, the Remain camp and the Leave camp. Here's a quick look at what both these groups are saying before that very crucial June 23rd referendum.
The Remain camp believes that Britain gets a big boost from membership, making selling things to other EU nations easier. They argue that the young immigrants who are keen to work help in fueling economic growth. Supporters say that Britain is stronger and secure as part of 28-nation club rather than being all alone. On the contrary, backers of Brexit argue that the country had not had a say since 1975 after voting to stay in the European Union. They believe that EU is holding Britain back. They accuse EU to charge billions of pounds as membership fee while Britain gets very little in return. The biggest problem they see is free movement of people moving anywhere without a visa. They demand Britain to have full control of its borders and regulating the number of people coming to live or work. Remain's central argument that leaving the EU would hit the economy, jobs and living standards has failed to feed through to the public. The 350 million claim floated by the Leave camp had a mass appeal. They argued that Britain sends 350 million euros a week to Brussels. The Remainers slammed the opponents hard for spreading the lie.
And keeping with news from Britain, tributes poured in across Britain to mourn the death of opposition Labour MP Jo Cox, who was shot dead in a street attack not far from her Northern England constituency. People laid flowers and left tributes in Parliament Square in central London on Thursday. Hundreds of people of all faiths packed into St. Peter's Church in Birstall for a service of remembrance. World leaders paid respects in her memory. Cox's killing has shocked the whole country and has led to the suspension of campaigning for next week's EU referendum. The 41-year-old lawmaker and a vocal advocate for Britain remaining in the European Union was attacked while preparing to meet constituents in Birstall near Leeds in northern England. Witnesses of the attack reported hearing the gunman shout "Britain first." Police meanwhile said that a 52-year-old man named Thomas Meyer was arrested and has been charged with the murder of the lawmaker. UK political party Britain First has denied having any involvement in the attack.
That's being utilised during this referendum campaign.
Now, amid the dilemma that surrounds UK's exit from the European Union, Gibraltar is a region which fears that leaving the EU would mean an economic downfall for it and hostility arising out of the past conflict between Britain and Spain. All eyes will now be on the outcome of the upcoming referendum, as it would pose a territorial challenge as well.
A 6.5 square kilometres British overseas territory bordering Spain anxiously waits the Brexit vote. Arguments for and against the United Kingdom remaining in the European Union fly across Gibraltar. The territory, which is in contention with Spain, has 23,000 UK citizens. Many fear that an exit from the Union would lead to economic decline and leave the border with Spain at the mercy of Madrid. The European Union is the only body that can guarantee fluid border crossing if Spain decides to impose tough controls at the non-Schengen border.
Gibraltar serves as an economic motor, an economic engine of the region next to Gibraltar as well. But again, that depends on an open, free-flowing border, and that is guaranteed by the European Commission, by the European Union, by European Union law.
Starting with Spanish Prime Minister Rajoy, Spain has sent out strong indications that it would be talking about Gibraltar the next day. It is not only the area of the United Kingdom to face this predicament. Residents living near the border between Northern Ireland, which is part of UK, and the Republic of Ireland worry about potential new controls. People are also concerned about the trade controls and, more importantly, return of historic hostilities between the countries. The Leave campaigners, however, argue that border controls were never an issue in the region. The ruling Scottish National Party has made it clear that an exit from European Union will give rise to calls for a new vote on Scottish independence from UK.
Clearly, the referendum is, on a knife edge across the UK. I think the polls suggest that, which is why I'm determined, as far as I possibly can and as far as the SNP can, to make the positive case for a Remain vote over the next 10 days.
The political implications of a Brexit vote are as much as the economic repercussions watched closely by the global markets. Britain should closely look out for territorial outcome too that is bound to create a great many changes in what would become the once United Kingdom.
After the horrific mass shooting in Orlando this week, the focus is back to gun possession laws in the United States. President Obama met survivors and families of victims and reiterated the need to have tougher gun control laws in the country. With a series of crucial votes expected in the US Congress in the coming weeks, what remains to be seen is whether it will bear any fruit.
When a gunman killed 50 people at a packed nightclub in Florida's Orlando on the 12th of June, questions were raised yet again on the gun laws in the United States. In the aftermath of the killings, the country is taking another look at its apparently lax laws on possession of guns. Even as President Barack Obama said that the horrific mass shootings was an act of terror and an act of hate, he added that this is further reminder of how someone can easily get firearms for such violence. The issue has brought together political parties in a country that is struggling with the after effects of one of the worst mass shootings in its history. This week, Senate Democrats were able to extract a promise from Republicans of a vote on two crucial legislations to prevent those on terror watch lists such as Orlando perpetrator Omar Martin from buying weapons and to extend background checks to gun buyers at exhibitions and on the internet. However, the fight is not a cakewalk. The US Congress tried to block terror suspects but failed after the San Bernardino shootings in December last year. The effort to check backgrounds did not bear fruit either after the Newtown school massacre in 2012. Both the efforts were allegedly foiled by the powerful gun lobby led by the National Rifle Association, which counters these efforts with a constitutionally mandated right to bear arms. President Obama, who met survivors, relatives and victims this week, has been calling on these changes and of the need to think about the risks that come in with being so lax in making powerful firearms available.
To defend the easy accessibility of assault weapons should meet these families and explain why that makes sense. I'm pleased to hear that the Senate will hold votes on preventing individuals with possible terrorist ties from buying guns, including assault weapons. I truly hope that senators rise to the moment and do the right thing.
The issue also found an unusual support in controversial Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, who supports the country's no-fly, no-buy clause. It prevents those on the terror watch list and not permitted to fly from buying arms as well. Surprisingly, his rival Democratic Hillary Clinton echoes his words. A Democratic bill would keep people on terrorism watch lists from buying guns, while a Republican version would allow the government to delay sale of guns to a suspected terrorist for 72 hours, but would require prosecutors to go to court to show a probable cause to block the sale permanently. Whatever the fate of gun laws in the United States, the urgency to amend them must remain government's top priority before another mass shooting claims innocent lives.
Brazil's political turmoil does not seem to end anytime soon. After former President Dilma Rousseff, this time the Congressional Ethics Committee has voted to strip suspended Speaker Eduardo Cunha of his seat. He has been accused of undeclared Swiss bank accounts. Now, Cunha insists that he has done nothing wrong and has vowed to appeal the decision. Interim President Michel Temer, on the other hand, has also been implicated in a bribery scheme.
It was political turmoil once again in Brazil. The Congressional Ethics Committee voted to strip suspended Speaker Eduardo Cunha of his seat on Tuesday. The former speaker has been alleged of lying about undeclared Swiss bank accounts. The man behind the suspension of Dilma Rousseff, however, insisted on his innocence and vowed to appeal the decision to another Congressional committee. On the other hand, Brazilian interim President Michel Temer has also been implicated in a bribery scam at Petrobras, the state oil company in the center of the political scandal rocking the country. Former Petrobras executive Sergio Machado made allegations that the interim president had asked for donations during his campaign, a claim which Temer has rejected. In another blow for Temer, Tourism Minister Henrique Alves resigned after being linked to the graft scandal, even as protests continue demanding new elections. Meanwhile, the suspended Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff said she is negotiating a political deal to escape impeachment and wants new elections to decide whether she can finish her term. The political drama in the biggest Latin American economy continues even as it gets ready to host Olympics for the first time.
They say winners don't do different things, they do things differently. And Mexican professor Moises Vasquez is proving just that. Dressed as Spider-Man, he teaches at the Mexico City University, compelling students to not just attend his lectures, but enjoy them as well.
Overwhelmed by long lectures in the classroom, not anymore in Mexico's UNAM students. Professor Moses Vasquez finds a new approach to keep his students' attention. Dress up as Spider-Man. 26-year-old Vasquez teaches at the Faculty of Science at the Mexico City University. A self-confessed fan of the superhero comics, his inspiration comes from Spider-Man's alter ego, Peter Parker's profession. The teacher turned Spider-Man believes he's making the classroom a happier place simply by donning his costume.
Yo sé que en la historia de Peter Parker,
I don't work differently from anyone else. I don't think it is the best class in the world just because I wear a costume, but my intention is honest. It's a dedication. I just want to make the classroom a better place.
Y en la Facultad de Ciencias sería padrísimo que llegara el Hombre Araña a dar clase.
Other people too are excited by the appearance of Spider-Man in their daily lives. Pulling on the blue and red suit of the superhero for his commute, Vasquez brightens up the lives of the many school children and office workers he comes across on his way to UNAM. People of Mexico generally surprised to learn their superhero is a university lecturer.
Afghanistan and Pakistan blamed each other for the deadly clashes that have claimed the lives of at least 7 people at the border that crosses Torkham. The guards at the border of the two countries exchanged rounds of fire on Sunday after Pakistan constructed defense facilities in a disputed area near the border. The clashes have left thousands of people stranded on both sides, hampering trade activities. This week, a revelation by a bookseller in Hong Kong has triggered protests. He has accused Chinese authorities of detaining him for over 8 months. Now, as he took on China's regime, protests across Hong Kong condemn the role of mainland authorities. Activists are now urging the government to pursue the case with Beijing, owing to a persistent fear, that of their freedom being curbed.
A revelation by one of the 5 booksellers who went missing mysteriously last year has triggered anger in Hong Kong. The man named Lam Winky claimed that he had been detained for more than 8 months by Chinese authorities. 2 days after his release on bail, Lam at a press conference in Hong Kong claimed that another of the 5 Libo was abducted from Hong Kong only. Of the 5 booksellers, Lam is the first one to speak out about his disappearance. All of them were said to be publishing salacious titles about leading Chinese politicians and disappeared at the end of the last year.
I don't understand why the all-powerful Chinese government can treat a bookseller this way and deem him guilty of violating Chinese laws.
About the televised confessions of 4 of the booksellers, Lam claimed that it was all scripted and they were forced to say that.
I'm not sure about the others, but I had a director and a script. I had to memorize and practice it.
Lam was given bail on a condition that he would provide the records of customers and who had received banned books from his bookstore. He was also asked to return to China by Thursday, but Lam dared not to go back, rather speak up. The case of bookseller Libo caused the greatest outcry as he was the only one to disappear from Hong Kong. Hong Kongers accused Chinese authorities of operating illegally in the city. As Lam took on the Chinese regime, protests were staged in Hong Kong, condemning role of mainland authorities. Activists have urged Hong Kong government to pursue the case with Beijing.
The meeting between Tibetan spiritual leader Dalai Lama and US President Barack Obama has angered China. Now, President Obama hosted Dalai Lama at the White House on Wednesday and voiced support on preserving Tibet's unique religious traditions. As expected, the meeting did not go very well with Beijing, and it has warned US to stop interfering in China's domestic matters. America has maintained that there is no change in its stand that Tibet is in fact a part of China. And now let's quickly get you more from across the world.
燃費悪化に伴うガソリン代の価格
Ha visto tutto quel bianco e giustamente
Well, here's something very interesting. Bulgarian-born artist Christo inaugurated his latest art installation in Italy that runs until the 3rd of next month. Now, the project, named the Floating Piers, built after under 2 years of planning and a personal cost of 15 million euros, will allow people to literally walk on water. With a bird's eye view from the mountains overlooking Lake Iseo, which is near Milan, the concept of the 81-year-old's latest artistic feat can clearly be seen. A 3-kilometer walkway rests on the surface of the lake and branches out from the mainland town of Solzano to incorporate the islands of Monte Isola and San Paolo, which are normally only accessible by boat.
Our project is all about joy and beauty. Absolutely, totally useless, unnecessary. Nobody needs them except myself, Jean-Claude, and some friends. And this is why they have this irrational, absolutely inexplicable freedom that exists because is what is it. It's not propaganda, it's not messages, no anything, it's only feel it. See it, feel it, move it, have all the senses.
A fishing boat, several migrants, and a realization that death is not far away. Art is a reflection of life, and some Sudanese artists are using it to share the life of migrants in the Mediterranean and the pain that they go through while living a life of uncertainty. The boat of death, as they call it, unveils a mother's desire to give her children a better life, a young man's struggle to raise money, and the anxiety of several thousands of migrants who undertake a journey across oceans without knowing what is on the other side.
A deadly route, fleeing trouble and persecution, uncertain about the destination, but a search for a new life. Migrants from war-torn, disturbed regions of Africa have been on the waves of trouble for long. Sudanese artists brought to stage the perilous voyage to Europe across the Mediterranean. The play, aptly named Boat of Death, reflects the tragedy of human trafficking and illegal migration.
The main theme of the play is to deliver a message to the youth to stop illegal migration and human trafficking. Theatre can deliver such a message because it is a tool that has a direct and fast impact.
The small fishing boat overloaded with migrants. Sudden realization that the inevitable is about to happen. The stormy seas and weight will soon sink the boat. The scene is all too real for dozens of Africans who undertake this voyage in a bid for a better tomorrow.
The message has been delivered to the people because after I finished the show, I met some people and they said they connected with the woman suffering.
The characters in the play portray all kinds of people. A woman who wants to give her child a better life after their father's death. A young man who raises money for the voyage by selling his kidney. And the human trafficker who abuses and ill-treats the illegal migrants. The end of the play is tragic. The dreams and wishes of hundreds sink along with the boat. At a crucial time when the world is shocked with migrant deaths every week, the play intends to make youngsters think, to make them aware that their situation in life is what mints money for a sophisticated network of smugglers and traffickers. It uncovers the other side of the seemingly bright European future. The question in everyone's mind resounds, is the journey worthwhile?
Well, this brings us to the end of this edition of World Konnect. Do send us your feedbacks. You can write to us. Our email ID is worldkonnect.ddnews@gmail.com. But before we leave, we take you to China, where there was a Disney parade during Shanghai Park's grand opening. A lovely visual treat. Thanks for joining in. See you again next week.